You are listening to Inspired Caring with Michelle Magner, episode number 164. Hello, welcome to Inspired Caring. I'm your host, Michelle Magner. If you are caring for an older family member, this is the podcast for you. Each week, I bring insight, tips, inspiration, and strategies to help you care for the people that you love without losing yourself along the way. Having cared for both of my grandmothers, I've helped manage everything from hospital stays, households full of belongings, to navigating senior living and end-of-life care. And I've worked in senior living as a result of that experience, serving my residents and their families as they've been on this journey too. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you enjoy this episode of Inspired Caring. I'm very excited today to have this conversation with Danielle from Failing Motherhood. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I know your episode on my podcast just came out in real time today when we are recording, so it's fun to be able to flip the switch and go and be on yours. So thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. I'm delighted you're here. Well, the title of your podcast is very triggering, actually. Failing Motherhood. So I would love for you to share with us your story and how you came to be a podcaster and things you talk about in your show.
Yeah, absolutely. So Failing Motherhood is actually turning 4 in like a month, which is insane because right now it's like kind of the 4th anniversary of COVID quarantine. And it feels like we've lived lifetimes since then. And at the same time, it's been a blur. And so this time 4 years ago, I was home trying to Zoom school with a kindergartner and a first grader and work from home in a way that I could not because I was doing in-person workshops and in-person home visits as, kind of a parenting consultant locally at the time. So I was kind of panicking on all fronts, and I ended up sending out a survey, and I just set up a Google form that was totally anonymous. And I sent it out to as many kind of parents as I could, put it on social media. And I said, what keeps you up at night as a parent? What are, some of the things that make you feel guilty or some of your fears? And it was more just, for market research and trying to find my next thing.
Yeah.
And the overwhelming response that I got, which was, over 100 parents, said, I feel like I'm failing. I feel like I'm so afraid of screwing up my child. I have a temper I didn't know that I had, and it makes me feel terrible. And I just feel like that temper is screwing up my kids, and ultimately I feel like I'm failing them. But I also feel like I'm the only one. And it was so obvious when I could just scroll through all of these responses and see that same word over and over again, and so many parents saying very similar things. Honestly, it was surprising to me because I thought the answer I got was going to be, I don't want something bad to happen to my child, or, I'm afraid of like more circumstantial anxieties. But no, that was the overwhelming feeling coming back. And so to me, it was like, well, if we're all feeling the same way, but we all feel like the only one, there's a disconnect here.
Right.
Like,
Absolutely.
we need to talk about this more. And so then I knew that I wanted to start a podcast because it felt like a medium that was very accessible to busy parents. We can put it on while multitasking. I didn't have the time to learn how to edit video. Social media just felt so fleeting that I was like, I want to be able to invest in something that I could really use as a platform that would build kind of, additional resources. So I was leaning into podcasts anyway. And I was talking to a friend who was kind of my guinea pig for a lot of things. And I was like, I want to start a podcast around this narrative so that we can break the stigma about, how much we all feel like we're failing, but we're not the only ones. We're not alone. And, if you're worrying about that, you're probably actually a good parent, for all these reasons. And so I was like, what if I started a podcast called like, you're a good mom or something? And she's like, I'd never listen to it. I won't listen to it one day in my life. And I was like, "Why?" She's like, "I would disqualify myself. I would be like, nope, I got to get my life together before I could subscribe to something like that, or that's just not for me." Or, she would like anything that was kind of in that like affirmative, empowered language. She
Yes.
was like, "Oh, like that's not me." So then I came back to her and I was like, "Failing motherhood? Would you listen to failing motherhood?" And she's like, 100% yes. So I know I have something there. And so at that point, I was like, okay, I'm going to run with this. And initially, when I started reaching out to a couple guests, like, hey, do you want to be on Failing Motherhood? I got kind of a negative response from one or two people where they said, like, hey, I think you should rethink that name. I don't know if that's, kind of speaking to what you want to be spoken to here. And I said, okay, if it's not a good fit, that's totally fine. But basically, I'm going to stick with this angle because when you see the cover image, which is a cupcake fell over and smashed to the floor, that's how I feel when I'm trying to be domestic. I'm trying to bake. I'm trying to, do all these things, and that's not even parenting, let alone how much we do really feel like we're throwing spaghetti at a wall day to day, and have this temper we didn't know we have, and feel like we're screwing up our kids for all of these reasons. You want to be able to feel like that is put into words that you haven't had before. And so that's what I wanted Feeling Motherhood to be, is experts that come on, moms next door that come on and truly be honest, vulnerable, real, and raw about how have you felt like you were failing motherhood. Let's actually talk about that and put a name to it. And we have stories about, oh, they eat too many snacks, or, I don't give them enough social stimulation, or they have too much screen time, or, typical guilt things like that, ranging all the way to very serious things like, I put them in a domestic violence situation, or,
Mm.
I put so much pressure on them that they went no contact later, or they ended up having to go to like a like wildlife rehab type situation in high school. And so, I feel like I failed. There's really, really deep stories shared. And I hope to share ones from kind of every angle of motherhood so that someone can find their story and relate to that. But I just feel like we all need to hear the things that aren't our own path, because then it brings such a sense of solidarity and understanding to what other people are going through, that we have no idea behind all the filters or behind our screens is really what's going on. So that's Feeling Motherhood. We have about 150 episodes now, and yeah, it's going strong because people relate.
I mean, yeah, so people relate. This is the fabric of our society. This is what's making us up. We act like we all have it together. And so often that's just not how we're feeling on the inside. Yesterday, I
No.
had a social media post that just had the best response I have ever seen. And it was a picture of me crying, like authentically, genuinely upset, and just talking vulnerably about emotions. And
Hmm.
in any given day, we can feel like we're having a great success in motherhood, or we can feel like we're having an ultimate fail. Not even necessarily with different kids, but even with
Hmm.
the same kid. Like, I succeeded in making the lunch today, getting him out the door, but then why aren't they talking to me when they get home from school?
Yeah, right. And we had a giant meltdown, and bedtime was a nightmare. Yeah, it's 30 seconds between the highs and the lows.
Right. Yeah. Flash in the pan.
Yes.
Flash in the pan. And I know so many of us who are mothers, or even not, even if you aren't a parent, we just feel like we're failing caregiving. And it goes back to,
Mhm.
there's no user manual, there's no handbook, there's no right way. And so when we have these expectations of ourselves, or these standards that we've set for ourselves, and feel like we're not even meeting our own standards, it just creates chaos, internal
Mhm.
chaos.
Mhm. Yeah, and so often we feel like those pressures are from outside of us, like from society or from influencers or from keeping up with the Joneses or from, things our kids are asking for, but I
Mhm.
feel like 9 times out of 10, it's self-imposed. It's standards we are holding ourselves to, no one asked us for, or we're comparing ourselves now to the idea of what we thought we would be as a
Mhm.
mother or as a parent 10 years ago before we ever became one.
Yes.
And, we're seeing the gap between what was the expectation and what is the current reality. And it's really uncomfortable to sit in that gap and feel okay about it when it feels like you're doing the most important thing you're supposed to do, right?
Right.
In your
Yeah.
roles.
Yes. And again, it's so similar, like just caring for any other human being at whatever stage they are in their life. And you think about the future outcomes of what could happen as a result of things that I am doing or I am not doing today.
It's
Can
very
get
high
to be,
stakes.
oh, it's very high stakes. It can get to be very overwhelming. I
Hmm.
know a lot of people, as they're on their own aging journey, I've worked with so many people who are 80, 90, 100 years old. Even when your kids are in their 60s and 70s, they still have this parent mindset. Like
Mm.
it's still hard for them. I mean, in the nicest way possible, I'm thinking this like never goes away. These feelings, because even people who are 90 years old and have 70-year-old children still feel like they are parenting in some ways.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it can be intense. I
Because you care ultimately. It's like you're going to be worried about things that matter. And if you feel like, these people matter to you, these relationships matter to you, this influence that you have matters to you, if you're taking what you're doing seriously, then it makes sense that you
right.
have anxiety around it and that you are being very introspective and reflective and taking ownership and accountability for your own behavior. And when you're not showing up in integrity, it, eats you away. That makes sense because you're pouring your whole heart and your whole being into who you're showing up as day to day. And of course, we have unrealistic expectations because it's like, well, our loved ones deserve the best. They deserve the best of me. They deserve the best caregiver. So, I can't hold myself to any lower standard than that. And yes, they do deserve the world.
Mm,
And we are all human beings. We
yeah.
only have so much capacity. So, if we're going to have compassion and grace and give the benefit of the doubt to our kids and their behavior or the behavior of the loved ones we're caring for, we can't see them in like a really compassionate light unless we're also seeing our own behavior in a really compassionate light. And that's much harder for us to access, I think, sometimes.
I love that you brought that up. I talk about the three foundational aspects of family caregiving are curiosity, communication, and compassion. And it's for the
Mhm.
person that you're caring for, but then also for yourself.
Mhm.
Do you feel like self compassion is the way to see yourself through feeling like you're failing?
I do. I have a similar 3C approach in my program, and it's communication, core needs, and composure. And
Mm,
the composure piece is, the processing of the stress, managing all the big emotions, having, a solid mindset. The communication piece is being kind and firm, trying to be a hostage negotiator when you've never been taught how to be one. And the core needs piece is understanding, with curiosity, what's going on with their behavior and why is it working for them and what needs are under the surface when we're playing whack-a-mole at what the end result is. And then usually it comes down to a sense of control and a sense of belonging and attention or connection. And I think that's pretty universal. We never stop being human, whether we're 3, 33, 83. We all
100,
have these
yeah.
needs still. And I think so much of being able to understand and have compassion for and not take personally some of our kids' tantrums and their, defiance and pushback and what we see as being disrespectful, we can detach from that in a really healthy way when we have a better understanding of it. We can bring in some better, more healthy perspective that's, a little bit more either open-minded or comprehensive and holistic. But then we have to turn that lens right to ourselves and bring more curiosity in and say, what's going on here? What do I need? And what's missing? Why did I fly off the handle? Why was that so hard for me? Why am I having such a hard day? And instead of beating yourself up with the answers,
Mm.
having compassion for yourself with those answers, to say, yeah, I can't control the world. I didn't on purpose wake myself up 8 times last night with an infant or a toddler. That is what I woke up working with today, is a much more zapped capacity. And that makes sense then when I have less patience for a tantrum at 1 o'clock over the food that I made that they flipped to the floor. That
Mhm.
makes sense. So when you can bring in that sense of understanding and compassion, then I always say to yourself what you would say to a friend if they shared a similar story to you. If your mom friend, talked at the park very vulnerably about the day before and how they felt terrible about it because they yelled at their kid over this really tiny thing, what would you say to them? Say that to yourself.
Right. No, that's so good. There's so many parallels that
So many parallels.
are
Yeah.
so fitting, because if you have someone that you're caring for in your home, even if they're out of state actually, and you've had a disruptive night's sleep or trouble at work or situations within your marriage, and then you're also,
Finances, all the things.
oh my gosh, everything, and then you're trying to be that support person for someone else. um,
Hmm.
it's just so important. Do you find that people, if they have the opportunity to reflect, then can make different choices going forward, like through as they're learning from you, uh,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
applying what you're teaching them? Does that help them have better strategies going forward?
Yeah, because that's
Mm.
the idea of discipline that I'm teaching them to do with their kids, is in the moment, in the moment of like really big emotions, a irrational reaction, a survival mode. That's not the moment that our kids are teachable.
Mm.
It's not the moment that we're really good teachers. It's not the moment that, we're all receptive to feedback that doesn't feel good. It's
Right.
just not. But we think that that's the moment of all this influence. And we gotta, pair good with good or bad with bad. And, it all happens in that one moment and then we move on. No, I think you need to survive that moment, help everybody regulate, kind of reset. And then there's always time to circle back. And, our kids can remember if we just kind of narrate, hey, did you just see what I saw? Like, this is what I have noticed. Or, remember last time we did this? What went wrong? How do we not do that again? Or, some type of conversation that just feels productive, because it's not saying, here's a magnifying glass and I want to make you feel really bad about what just
Mm.
happened. It's a collaboratively problem solving approach that says, hey, there's just a problem to solve here. How can we work together to find a solution that will work better next time? When you learn how to do that with your kid and you understand that that can happen an hour later in the car, that can happen at bedtime that night, that can happen a week from then before, you go back to grandma's. That you have time. And when you can feel that pressure coming off yourself to solve everything immediately because we're just uncomfortable and hate the idea that, it could happen again or it could get worse or they're on this, runaway train that's already way off the tracks. When you're able to zoom out and see that you have time and they're not going to jail tomorrow,
Mhm.
everything's going to be okay, right? Because we just jump to those overgeneralizations so quickly.
Right.
Then you can do that same thing with yourself and you can realize, oh, okay. So if I just have a moment to reflect, and especially if I have a coach that kind of knows my family and is able to really validate, this struggle for me, if I go ahead and kind of rehash, here's exactly what happened last night at bedtime. Here's what led up to it. Here's how I handled it. What would you recommend? Then I can ask more questions. And then we can connect dots that weren't connected before. Oh, you know what? It probably wasn't about the granola bar. That was just the last straw. like probably is more about, this sibling relationship or this other issue that was happening before. And then you can kind of realize, okay, so that's the same for my behavior too. It wasn't about, them getting the toothpaste on the sink. That was a last straw because of all of the things I dealt with that
Mhm.
day and the mental load that I had at that point and how my capacity was on fumes. Then there's just a lot of other things contributing to how I was showing up in that moment as a parent. Now I can go back and problem solve. Okay, so the problem to solve is my capacity is on fumes. That's actually what's going on. It's not that I hate my child. Very rarely is that the problem, right? So maybe it's that I don't feel like, my approaches are very effective because I'm not seeing actual progress. Like it feels like Groundhog Day, where, I'm
Mhm.
saying the same things like a broken record and we have the same behaviors day after day after day. Maybe I just need new tools. Maybe it's that it's just my capacity. And when I feel better, I do better. That's a very direct correlation. Okay, that's a problem to solve. Now, let's go ahead and be strategic about the future. What can you do differently today or tomorrow to solve that problem once we've identified it? And a lot of times we just can't identify it because it's so close to our face and it's so all encompassing. And, clients will say, well, this has nothing to do with my parenting, but, and they'll go into some story where it's a ton of added stress or it's this extenuating circumstance that is they're moving or there's another long-term illness or they just went through COVID and it's like, well, yeah, that's going to affect your parenting.
Right.
That's not a compartment of who we are. It's a complete like ball of just a tangled web of everything that we got going on. And when we can see that for what it is, we can become a lot more objective, I think.
Well, and there's this little space between the incident that occurred, the opportunity to reflect. And I feel like so many of us just cram that space with guilt.
Oh yeah.
And so,
Yeah, that's gonna take anything you got left for the day, spent it on that, you got nothing left.
right, the tank is completely empty. The coin
Yeah.
that I think we often flip in caregiving, and I mean, I'm a mom as well and have 3 kids. I feel like there's this, it's more so with caregiving, it's this guilt resentment coin.
Mm,
That we tend to flip, where we find either we're doing things that we really don't want to be doing and feeling
mhm.
resentful, which does come up in parenting. I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
always want to go through the
I'm
back.
cooking 3 meals for, everybody that doesn't wanna eat what I'm eating. Yep.
Right, right. So we're doing things that we really don't want to be doing and we're feeling resentful, or we're holding a boundary, trying to protect ourselves, trying to protect our energy, or finding that we're just pulled in different directions. And then we feel horribly guilty. And
Yeah.
so just navigating that, what are your thoughts or approaches about how we can better navigate that?
Mhm. And I think when you're not convicted and confident in what matters most to you, then you can constantly get swept up in any one thing in any one moment is the end of the world because you didn't go to that school event or you yelled in that one moment. And there's so many moments so many times a day that you have no uh there's no what's the word, there's no loss. There's always going to be something
Like the
that,
opportunity loss of what?
yes,
Yes.
there's always going to be something that you can find that will be another thing that is evidence that you're messing up or you're failing as a parent. If you're not sure what things are the biggest things and what things are, nice to haves. Where to me, I love doing drop off and pick up.
Mm.
To me, that's like quality time because we never have music on. We're always talking. It feels very connective. It feels like there's a lot more of everybody being present, even though we're not looking eye to eye. And for me, for my work schedule, I have kind of made that a priority for me to be the default, kind of car driver around her. And I have to remind myself of that when, I start to get resentful because there's, kids getting picked up at different times or other, extenuating circumstances going on. And, to me, that's something that matters a lot. But then I have to give there has to be a sacrifice. There has to be, okay, well, then I'm working at night, maybe, 1 or 2 nights a week to kind of make up for that because my workday is shorter. And I could easily just fixate on, oh, I didn't do bedtime tonight. They really needed me. But I was there, from 8 to 9, and I was there from 3 to 4, and we had all these other times. So you have to be able to pick and choose, or you have to be able to know what's my priority right now. And I think every parent is semi surprised and reassured that it really only takes 15 minutes a day of being actually present with our kids, giving them some eye contact to be enough that sustains a close relationship and that provides the security they need for our parent-child relationship attachment. And sometimes that 15 minutes can still be hard to garner because we're constantly multitasking. We got dinner to make and we got laundry to do, and there's we're constantly just going from one thing to the next. But if you can somehow build that into your routine, last 15 minutes of the day, first 15 minutes of the day, first 15 minutes when they get home, you get home, whatever, and do something that you both have capacity for. I actually created a little tool with Mighty and Bright, Sarah Olsher, and their little flashcards, their little, card deck that are activities that don't require any setup, that are actually feasible to get done in 15 minutes. It's not like we're going to bake banana bread for the next 2 hours or some type of large commitment. We're going to look at funny memes, or we're going to go for a quick walk, or we're going to do my hair or something feasible.
Mm-hmm.
They're in 4 different categories: active, chill, art, and play. And the idea is that you, as the caregiver, pre-sorts the cards and picks maybe 3 or 4 things you have the capacity for. You're in the mood to do. You could actually conceptualize doing with your child that day. And then you offer those 4 cards to your child and say, hey, what would you like to do with me? Then they pick from those 4, and they still feel like they got to do what was their choice. They get to have a choice in the matter, but then you're actually going to come with the energy of wanting to be there, which makes the biggest difference in the world, because we can parallel play with our kids all day and they're still going to feel clingy. They're still going to feel like they wanted more out of you. And that's where that resentment, I think, really grows, because it's like, I just went to Disney World with you today. Like, I have nothing else to give you. But in our kids' mind, it was like, but it wasn't the maximized time where I can really soak it up and it just be me and you. So those are special time cards. I can send you the link if you want to just kind of share that resource with your
Absolutely.
listeners as well. But hear me say, the point of those is not that you are setting up Pinterest ideas and being the most Mary Poppins parent. It's that you're prioritizing your mental health at the same time as your child's, to be able to say, I know that you need time from me today, but here's the way that I'm going to make sure that I have the capacity for it, and that I can imagine doing that, and that I can build that into my day in a way that works for me too, so that it takes care of the guilt, but it also takes care of the relationship piece. And if you just prioritize that, seriously, at the end of the night, you had 15 minutes, you can go to bed without beating yourself up, because yeah, sure, there was a million other things you could have done that day, but you did the thing that matters most. And I think when you kind of prioritize it in that way, you can have a lot less guilt and frustration at your own behavior, because you knew that you did what you could, and that's what mattered most.
I love this card deck. I'm excited to get that link, and I will definitely add it to the show notes. I feel like I continually, with my kid, go back. I have one kid left at home, and I continually go back to an activity that holds a memory of something that felt pleasant to me. And, he's in a different place now, and he has a different schedule now. And so we're finding ourselves going to Dairy Queen a lot, which is maybe not the best long-term health goal priority
Fair.
activity. However,
Yeah.
it's consolidated time in the car. And
Yeah.
it's literally 18 minutes round trip, including getting
There you
ice
go.
cream in our hand. But
Yeah.
I find that I just kind of keep going back to the same 6 things. And there's room for something different. And he
Yeah.
can't provide me with that list of things he's will. I keep asking him, well, what do you want to do? Or what sounds good to you? And he's a 16-year-old boy. He's like, I don't know. I don't know. Go
Yeah.
ziplining. I'm like, okay, well,
It's not going to work.
I would love that. I do enjoy that activity. They're
Once
close
a year,
once
maybe.
a year and it's winter. And yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
It's
think
hard
that's
to brainstorm ideas, even if you have the whole internet at your fingertips. It's just immediate overwhelm. And, our brains are taxed. We have 18 tabs open at any one given time. We don't have the time to come up with another one. And we're actually working on a teen deck where it has, a little bit different activities, but then we reverse the roles a little bit. So it's the teen that pre-chooses
mm,
things that they might be in the mood for, and then the parent picks. So that way, it's a little bit more set up to be successful based on where they're at.
heck yeah, sign me up for that deck. I'm ready.
Okay.
If you could expedite that, that would be
We'll
super.
let Sarah know. We'll work on it after this call.
It is hard. All of this is so hard. And you were mentioning how the stakes do feel so high. And I think
Hmm.
there's also some room for we're just going to mess it up. We're just not going to always get it
We
right.
can't do it
And
all.
we
Yeah.
can't do it all. And it's going to be okay. And I think so many
Yes.
of us, like I have for certain structured my parenting style around how I was raised. And I just saw a thing, a meme or something about being the parent that your kid needs as opposed to being the parent that you needed.
Yes. That's
Yeah,
hard.
it
Yeah.
is hard.
Yeah. So often we're just kind of swinging from one end of the pendulum to the other. Okay, my parents did this not well, so I have to course correct and maybe, overemphasize that piece with my family, or, I have to make up for lost time, or I have to kind of, course correct. And we are way over here doing that thing before we even realize that is not what this kid is asking for at all, because that might work well for kid number one, and then kid number two, you're doing the same thing and it is a totally different result. And then you're kind of back to square one. And a good parent realizes, oh, wow, this is just not working.
Mm,
And that doesn't matter. That doesn't mean anything about you. It means something good if you can take into account that new information and then make a new choice with new information. And every day our kids give us new information. We get to know that who they are a little bit more than the day before. And we can't know who they are when they're 6 months old or, 16 months old. We have to keep being humble enough to say, what do you need from me today? And who are you today? And how are you different than your sibling? And how do you maybe needed something different from me, or a little bit of a different approach? And we really do need to customize our parenting to the kids that are in front of us needing that parenting from us. And so, as much as there is a lot of great parenting information out there, I think a lot of times it only gives you more ammunition to beat yourself up,
mm,
because you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, and you're trying to make your house look like what it looks like somebody else's house looks like, or, what the culture of your home should feel like. And ultimately, I think the parents that I work with are the ones that have tried everything, feel like they're doing all the things, applying everything they've ever heard on any Instagram post, and still feeling like they're beating their head against a wall because it's just not landing, or it's just a mismatch. They're trying to send one message and their kid's getting another, or they just can't seem like they're like, my kid doesn't listen to me. Well, your kid probably feels like you're not listening to them.
mm,
And that's the breakdown. So it doesn't matter how well intentioned or even by the book what you're doing is, if it's not landing in a connective way where your kid feels heard and understood and safe with you. And, then you're able to really be someone who's continuing to individualize your approach. And that's really what I teach parents to do, is become really confident in what actually works for their kid at this age with this circumstance, and let everything else go and deal with all the unsolicited feedback and the mother-in-law and the sister-in-law that's giving you the eye, or the people in Target that are staring you down, and actually be able to say, no, I'm actually doing the right thing for my kid based on the information I have today.
Mm.
And that might change tomorrow. And it's okay to change my mind. And with new information with parenting, every day, there might be something I missed 2 years ago. But for today and tomorrow, I'm giving it my all. I'm doing my best. And that's really hard to say when you're constantly going to come across something else that you haven't done with your kids, or some other way that you worded something wrong and you're, saying good job instead of saying you worked hard on that, or, whatever it is.
Mhm.
There's always going to be something else. But when you figure out your kid, you can let a lot of that other little stuff go.
It feels like the common denominator or the baseline or step one. It's not the thousand actions that you're going to take. It's being that curious observer.
Yeah.
Feels
Yeah.
like to be a quote good parent. Like the goal is if you are doing the same things day after day after day, expecting different results, it's not moving the needle. Your emotions are running high and
Mm-hmm.
you're constantly not feeling the emotions that you want to feel. I mean, listen, we're all going to feel the rainbow on any given day. But you can leverage strengths and you
Mm-hmm.
can start to be that observer to realize what's going to work and what's not. So it's a little bit less about taking the thousand different actions and more observing, it sounds like. The
Which is
person,
uncomfortable. It's
yeah.
much more comfortable to check a list, check every text box and say, look, I accomplished it. I did it. I checked everything
Mhm.
off on my list today. And that feels tangible. I can wrap my mind around that. It feels very, very concrete. I need this to be black and white. Just tell me the formula, A plus B equals C, so then I can let all my anxiety go that my kid's going to turn out and be this like perfect contributing citizen to society. And there just isn't that level of comfort in parenting. It's very uncomfortable and it's very uncertain, and you don't get to see the payoff of your hard work for a while, if ever, sometimes. And so that it feels very hard and uncomfortable and difficult.
One of the ahas I had a month or so ago is, and I believe this fully in my soul, and it's hard to remind myself when you're so feeling so responsible for someone else. But I believe, are all souls just here having this human experience. Like everybody is on their own journey. And my kids are on their own journeys. And I'm kind of to the point with a 21, 19, and 16-year-old that I can be some bumper rails and I can offer advice. Hopefully they're asking and it's not unsolicited, but
Yeah.
but he and I say he because he's the last one at home, like he is having his own experience. And I have to remember that I am not responsible
Mm-hmm.
for every experience and outcome that he is going to have. I can just infuse love into the situation and kindness and support and some structure. I guess baseline.
Yeah.
What are we responsible for? And then
Yeah.
we let go.
Yeah, I really think it's like they are gonna go through their cocoon, in and become a butterfly and fly. And like it's our job to put our hands behind our back and like let them. Like because if you
Mhm.
if you touch a butterfly when it's like getting its wings, like then it's not gonna be able to fly. Like you're interfering with the process too much.
Mhm.
And I think our kids are going to be who they are. And there's so much even nature versus nurture. I think the biggest piece of the nurture part is that strong relationship right off the bat, that they develop trust and they genuinely feel safe, and they are able to know when I cry, someone listens. And, if I can trust this person, I can trust this person, and just kind of have that strong foundation. That's huge for mental health and setting that standard of how I deserve to be treated and a lot of that. But then a lot of their interests, their talents, their passions, their temperament, all of those things were already pre-coded in their DNA and they're gonna come to fruition. And we just have to kind of keep seeing what we're noticing, helping our kid notice that, and helping guide and coach them to know how to manage some of that self-awareness, or know what works best for them and how to advocate for themselves, or how to put themselves in situations where they're going to be most successful, or find what that lane is going to be for them. But the more we impose,
Mhm.
and the more we try to control, and the more we see them as an extension of ourselves, or see them as our report card. If they're doing well, then I'm doing well. If they're not doing well, I'm not doing well. As a parent, we have to be able to really detach in a healthy way, and see them, yeah, like you said, on their own journey. And when we do, we can take some of the pressure off ourselves, because I don't think there's as many things that we can influence as we might think. Even with like work ethic, or the overall mentality of how much fear they might experience, of how brave they are, let's say. We can say that our family core value is being brave all day, but they're probably going to struggle with things regardless of how much we've talked about it, right? Like, there's just so much about that they have to figure out on their own in real time, and they might have to learn it the hard way sometimes, and that's really hard too, because we're trying to just have them avoid as much pain as possible. But some of that pain is part of their journey, and it's just hard. But yeah, I think that they're gonna do great the more that we offer that mutual respect and that trust in them, that they also know themselves just as much as we're learning who they are too.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, parenting, caregiving, we want to put our head on our pillow and just have the thought, I really did the best I could today, or I really did what needed to be done today, or today was just a day. Like, at least to put your head on the pillow and know you showed up in some capacity, or I don't know how do you soothe yourself, but just to feel like you just did what you could that day. Like, it doesn't always have to be. I think about the seasons, and we're not always meant to be in spring, right? We're not always meant to be
Mhm.
blossoming. And so just at the end of the day, feeling, I hope people don't, I'm stumbling on my words here. I don't want people to feel at the end of the day like they coulda, shoulda, woulda. And I
Yeah.
don't want people at the end of the day to feel like it wasn't enough.
Yeah. And I think that's why we're in the coaching space, is because it's future orientated,
Mhm.
right? Where we realize just it's not worth all this energy and effort to dwell in the past, in the coulda, shoulda, wouldas, and go back and overanalyze and ruminate over every decision we made in the past 24, 48 hours. It's all information, but how can we take that information and objectively make a new decision tomorrow?
Mhm.
What can we do differently tomorrow, and how can we make a plan to maybe prevent what happened earlier today?
Right.
When you take a problem solving approach and try to just identify what the problem is that you can solve for, it actually provides more of a sense of reassurance, because there's a sense of control there. I can do something about it. There's, hope, there's light at the end of the tunnel. There's the idea that tomorrow might be better than today. So if you just shift a little bit of that focus and energy from yesterday into tomorrow, I do think that there's an element of self soothing there, because you can help brace yourself for getting your game face on to
Mhm.
face the next day, with a little bit more capacity than you had today.
Absolutely. Yeah, as I'm sitting here, I'm like, this all just feels so heavy and serious. Oh my gosh. And I think that's where the card decks that you have created are can really come into play. Like, how are we bringing levity to the situation? How are we
Yeah.
lightening up a little bit? How are we not taking everything so freaking seriously? So at
Yes.
the end of the day, we're not just like processing and solving. And I speak for myself, having been in both roles. I always want to do better. I have a Gallup strength of maximizer. So that means I'm always looking, oh, what's the better way? But even a
Mhm.
spectacularly beautiful Christmas or Easter morning, like, I'm thinking, how could this be better next time? Right. And
Yeah.
just like chill out, just be present in the
Right.
moment and
Yes.
lighten it up a little bit.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up because a big element is playfulness inside my program that I work with clients because they typically will come in so on edge, taking every moment very seriously, taking a lot of meaning from each of those moments and becoming pretty high strung and insecure through that process of just like absolutely everything is high stakes. And when your kid feels that from you, then they're just joining you in that like high strungness and they can't relax as well because they're like, well, something's bothering mom and that means I better be on edge too. And it's probably about me and just jumping to conclusions. And so when you understand what behavior is super normal, what behavior is really kind of nothing to worry about. It's either a phase, it's developmental, or it's very much kind of their personality. And you didn't create this monster. It's not going to send them to jail in 15 years. You can bring that element of perspective in. Then you're like, okay, well, then how do I just not let it bother me so much?
Right.
How do I just create some space between me and my reaction to it? And that's where you really do want to bring in the element of playfulness, because I think a lot of moments there's a crossroads. And as a parent, you're either going to get angry or you're going to get playful.
Mhm.
And, first you have to realize that there's a choice there and understand what's even on that other side of like, there is another reaction. But that playfulness can look like just being silly. Right? Like, if our kid a lot of times strong-willed kids will, have animalistic tendencies where they start to grunt or growl
Mhm.
or, point and make these, like, sounds, and it's very annoying to parents because they're like, "Use your words, right? Don't just point to me. I'm not we're not cavemen." But be a caveman.
Yeah.
Grunt back, right? Like, that's so much funner because then if you guys start giggling, then you walk away from that moment feeling like an awesome parent, right? If you can get through the morning routine and send them off to school and they're giggling as they leave the car because you were just being so over the top, goofy, rather than everybody crying on the way to school and you just having that hangover of like, I just set
Mhm.
up their day to be awful because I was yelling at them about being late. There Some of those moments you're going to have the same behaviors. They're going to wake up grumpy. You're still going to have to remind them 1,000 times about getting their clothes on and you're going to run late. But how can you bring that element of playfulness in where it allows you to access kind of that improv part of you that you're really proud of when it comes out? And it feels so good and you can connect and you can laugh. When you laugh, you feel better. It doesn't matter, what went on the rest of the day when you can reflect back on that moment of just like breaking out into giggles together.
That's so good. I love it. How do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, I am over on Failing Motherhood. So wherever you're listening to this, you can come find us there and subscribe or follow. Um, my website is parentingwholeheartedly.com. And that's where you can find a free training on parenting strong-willed kids without threats and bribes. So you can break free of power struggles, guilt, and self-doubt. So if you have one of those tough kiddos with really high highs and low lows and big emotions and just don't feel like you can figure out what works for them, I would definitely recommend starting there, downloading that and kind of understanding all of the misconceptions that you might be trying and relying on with consistency with and consequences and just what not to spend your energy on for sure. So that's my biggest free resource as well as the podcast. Failingmotherhood.com has a list of kind of our most listened to episodes and where to start with a good playlist for strong-willed kids as well. And then I'm on Instagram. I'm at parent_wholeheartedly.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Do you have any final thoughts or anything that we didn't cover that we want to make sure you have an opportunity to share?
Yeah, I think just if you can focus on one action item, whether that's finding those cards and starting to put in a 15-minute section of your day that you can kind of check that box and know, at least I did that, even if the laundry didn't get folded and the dishes are still in the sink.
Mhm.
If you can actually have that 15 minutes, it's going to matter. It's going to trickle down a lot. It's going to improve your kids' behavior. It's going to, reduce your resentment. It's going to make you feel better about how you're doing as a parent. Um, I think that was one of the biggest takeaways I would have from our conversation, and just being able to find more relatable stories so that you have proof that the way that you're feeling as a parent is not you're not the only one. There's tons more people that feel the way you do, and you can be validated. That's a normal way to feel, and being able to just know that you don't have to keep staying in isolation or beating yourself up for that. There's so much that are just small things that will make you feel a little bit better day after day. But you're definitely doing better than you give yourself credit for sure.
Always. That's fabulous. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.